I want to share with you something on my heart today that applies not just to dads, not just to men, obviously, but it has to apply to all of us. And maybe some of you remember in 1992, the Olympics that were held in Barcelona, Spain. One of the competitors in the Olympics in 1992, his name was Mark Tewksbury. Mark was a competitor in the 200-meter backstroke. He's from Canada. Mark won my one Canadian friend. I love him. Woo, that's awesome. Should we try it again? Mark Tewksbury from Canada. There's a few of you here, a few of us, all right? So anyway, I'm Canadian, yes. You still like me? Mark Tewksbury, he made it to the medals platform. In fact, he won the gold medal in the 200-meter backstroke literally by a fingertip. It was just amazing. But when he gets to the gold medal platform, it was not his first time there. Because the night before his competition, the night before he was supposed to compete, Mark snuck into the arena. He gets up there to the medals platform, and he stands right where the gold medalist stands. And he stood where the gold medalist stands, imagining himself winning the gold medal the night before he wins the gold medal. He envisioned himself as a winner. He saw himself as a winner before he actually competed and won that gold medal. Let me ask you something. How do you see yourself? When you look at yourself, when you look in the mirror, how do you see yourself? What is your perception of self? Do you see yourself as a hero, as a champion? Do you see yourself as an influencer? Do you see yourself as a winner? Maybe more importantly, we're going to answer the question, how do you think God sees you? When God looks at you, you're one of His creation. How is it that God sees you? Now, that's an important question for us to answer, how He sees us and how we see Him. More importantly yet, how you see God determines how you see yourself. If you see yourself as a loser, as you see yourself being defeated, if you see yourself as being inadequate, inept, ill-equipped, always behind and never enough, it's probably because our view of God is not big enough. Your viewpoint and how you see God influences everything about your life. It influences how you approach relationships. It influences how you approach your marriage. It influences how you handle money. It influences how you view your life. It influences your perspective of the circumstances that you're in. So it's so important for us to see God properly. Now, here's what God does to us sometimes. He brings about circumstances. In fact, He engineers events in our life that we would look at them as being challenges, difficulties, trials, things that we want to wriggle out of and we don't want to endure and go through. But God is engineering things in our life to help us understand who He is so that we can understand who we are. Think of the prayers you and I so often pray. We pray prayers, oh God, get me out of this difficult situation. But maybe a better prayer for us to pray is this, oh God, what do you want to get out of me in this difficult situation? Because God engineers these circumstances, these events in our life, the difficulties, so that we can get to know who He is a little bit better. Now, all too often, unfortunately, you and I carry with us a self-perception that instead of God determining who we are and how we see ourselves, it goes back to the words or the actions of somebody else. If you grew up in an alcoholic home, an abusive home, verbally, physically, emotionally. Maybe you've gone through a divorce. Maybe you've got a physical disability or there's some limitation in your life and you've had to wrestle through that whole thing. Somebody made fun of you. You were too tall, too short, too wide, too narrow, whatever the case is. There was something about you. And their words to this day, it really doesn't matter what age you are. And you know my disability, if you've been in this church for any length of time. You know that those words can stick with you for a long time, and that tends to be how you see yourself. But today I want to share with you a story to tell you how God sees you, and it's how God sees you before you accomplish anything. Before you achieve anything, this is how God sees you. So if you brought a Bible, you brought your device, I want you to go to this Old Testament book. It's called the book of Judges, just Judges. And we're going to be in Judges chapter 6. We're going to talk about a figure that might be familiar to you if you've grown up in the church. His name is Gideon. Let me give you a little bit of a backstory before we get into the story as we talk about Gideon today. Gideon is a guy who's just like you and just like me. He's living in Israel. And here's what you need to know about Israel. Israel was no different than you and me in this building today. Sometimes Israel was just hot for God. I mean, everything was going great. They're serving God. They're passionate about God. They're close to God. And then there were other times in their life when they just were totally apostate. They walked away from God. They forgot about God. They didn't depend on God. They didn't need God. And when they got into those situations, God engineered circumstances in their life to bring them back into relationship with Him again. When our story picks up here, Israel is not led by a king, but they just have judges, kind of guys that were appointed, elected, whatever, that led the nation of Israel. And Israel had sunk so low, in fact, that they're now worshiping a couple of idols named Baal and Asherah. Baal was the male version, Asherah the female version of the fertility gods that they served at the time. The Asherah pole was a wooden pole that was carved with all kinds of figures on it, and whenever they would worship Asherah and Baal, they would sacrifice animals, and there was all kinds of sexual perversions that went along with the whole thing. The same kind of stuff you could imagine in the industry today. It all went on then. There's nothing new under the sun. And that's how low the nation of Israel had sunk when our story picks up. And to get their attention, God has sent this invading army from the land of Midian to come and kind of harass the Israelites. In fact, here's the way it worked. The Israelites were really great at farming. They had this incredibly fertile land, and then they would go out and they would harvest their crops. They'd bring in the crops in the fall of the year. Actually, it would be about this time of the year in that region that they'd be harvesting the crops. And then the Midianites, they would just swoop right in and steal the food and run back to their land. So they got the Israelites to do all their farming for them. They stole the stuff and then came back. So as the story picks up in Judges chapter 6, verse number 11. Here's how the story reads. Read it with me. The angel of the Lord, there was an angel of the Lord. He's got a message. He wants to talk to Israel. He came and he sat down beneath the great tree at Ophrah. Now, I don't know what the great tree of Ophrah was. It must have been unique in shape. It was huge, whatever the case was. And so the angel appears here. And when he gets there, he appears to Gideon, the son of Joash, who was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. So imagine this. Normally, when you threshed out grain, they'd bring in the sheaves of wheat. They'd lay them down out in this open space. They would trample upon it. They would do something to break the kernels away from the beards, the heads, and all that kind of thing. And then they would take their forks and they would throw the stuff up in the air so that the wind would blow away the chaff, and all that would remain was the grain. The winepress was hewn out of rock down in the ground. And so here's Gideon. He's down in this winepress. Can you imagine how dirty? If you've been a part of the wheat harvest at all, you know how dirty and itchy this whole thing is. So he's down there trying to thresh wheat in kind of this pit. He's hiding because he's afraid of the Midianites. Now that's the story. That's the backdrop. He's hiding because he's afraid of the Midianites. And this angel appears to him. And look what the angel says to him in verse number 12. The angel of the Lord says to him, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." Wait, this is Midian. This is just a guy, this is a guy. And he's threshing wheat, not in the open plains. He's not got like ammunition strapped across here and an AK-47 and grenades around. I mean, this is Midian. He's wearing some kind of long garb and he's down in the pit and he's threshing wheat, and the angel of the Lord appears to him and goes, "Mighty hero, God's with you." Now, here's what you see. You see yourself, and I see myself in the very next word, because look at the verse, look at 13. He says this, "Sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say that the Lord brought us up out of Egypt, but now the Lord's abandoned us and he's handed us over to the Midianites?" I'm telling you, he's got the same problem you and I have. If God were to come and stand before you today and say, "Hey, guys, I want you to know something. God's with you," we could easily respond, "Well, if God's with me, why have I got financial problems? If God's with me, why did my wife walk out on me? If God's with me, why am I dealing with the health situations I'm dealing with right now? If God's with me, why am I in the circumstances I'm in right now? Why did I lose if God's with me, why are all these bad things happening to me?" Sometimes the biggest battles you and I have to fight is the attitude battle. But God doesn't give up on us. I love this. Then the Lord turned to him, verse 14, and he says, "I want you to go with the strength that you have, Gideon. And I want you to rescue Israel from the Midianites. I'm sending you." To which, if I was Gideon, I'd be going like, Is there somebody else around here? Verse 15, but Lord, he's got a response just like you and I. Whenever God asks us to do something, whenever God asks us to respond in obedience and take a risk, he says, how can I rescue you? My clan's the weakest in the whole country amongst the people of Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. Like, we're just little. There's no way I can be a warrior. I'm not a warrior. I'm not your guy. But God doesn't give up on us. The Lord said to him in verse 16, I'll be with you and you'll destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. Should I believe that? Like how many have ever prayed and you kind of maybe get a sense like maybe God's talking to you and he says something to you and then you go to church and the pastor preaches a sermon and you think it's God, but you know what? I'm not sure it's God. Verse 17, Gideon says, you know what? If you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that you're really the Lord speaking to me. We all want a sign. Gideon's no different. So you know what Gideon does? I need proof. I need evidence that this is really you. I mean, we've all questioned God in this place. So here's what Gideon did. He goes, prepares this young goat. He cooks a goat, gets himself a loaf of bread, gets some broth. He cooks it, and he brings it back to the angel of the Lord who's sitting underneath a tree. And this is what I love. What he's doing is worshiping. He's worshiping. And you know why worship is so important? We come together on a church on a Sunday morning. We're singing songs. And we're not just singing songs. Do you know why worship is so important? Worship helps us forget what's wrong with us and what's right with God. Worship helps us forget what's wrong with us and what's right with God. And that's exactly what Gideon does right here. So he brings his food out and the angel says, well, just put the food on the rock and then pour the broth over it. So now the food's all wet, right? And then the angel of the Lord takes his staff and he touches the food and poof, it goes up in fire and the angel disappears in the plume of smoke. How many think that'd be cool on Monday, right? I'm all about that. Let's do that. I'd be like, okay, God, I think I heard from you. Like, I think this is good. This is good. Well, now the first test, though, comes up. The first test comes up for Gideon. And it gets very intimate here because God is going to address Gideon probably where his greatest fears are, and it's with his family. If you are a servant of Christ today and you want to be a Jesus follower, you already know this. Sometimes the most difficult people to be a Christian in front of is your family. So, angel of the Lord gives him command. Look at the command. In verse number 25, that night the Lord said to Gideon, I want you to take the second bull from your father's herd, that one that's 7 years old. I want you to pull down your father's altar to Baal. Look at the home he's grown up in here. Happy Father's Day. You going to go worship Baal today? Go pull down your father's altar to Baal, cut it down, and then cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it. And then next, he goes on, he says, then I want you to build an altar to the Lord your God on the hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. He broke up the stones that would make this Baal thing. They'd carve it out of stone. He says, I want you to bust up that stone god that they've got standing up and just lay out the stones right there and then hack up that Asherah pole, put it out there so you got fuel for the fire, throw the bull on there, sacrifice that bull as a burnt offering on the altar using the wood of the Asherah pole as you cut it down. And then, you know what I love about the story? Gideon is so you, he's so me. Look how this plays out. Verse 27, so Gideon, he took 10 of his servants and he did as the Lord commanded, but he did it at nighttime. Yeah, I'm a hero. I'm really bold and courageous. I'm going to do this at nighttime so nobody sees. He did it at nighttime because he was what? He was afraid. Come on. Let's just be real and honest. Anytime God challenges us to give more money, to give some money, to give of our time, to say yes, to say no, to step away from, to step into, we're afraid. We're just like Gideon. And so he steps in, he goes at nighttime, and he goes at night because he was afraid of the members of his father's household and the people of the town. Just think about this. He's saying, Gideon, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go stand up to the current culture of your community, and I want you to decimate and tear down everything that they hold near and dear to them. Okay, I'll do it at night, though. I mean, I don't want anybody, but he takes 10 of his servants, and apparently one of the servants snitched. Pastor Colin, our youth pastor, you need to get to know our youth pastor. He's from Chicago. You know Chicago, right? Chicago. He's from Chicago. Probably keeps a gun in his desk drawer. I don't know, but no, he doesn't. Pastor Colin, please forgive me. Pastor Colin reminded me this last week. You know what they say in Chicago? Snitches get stitches, and they end up in ditches. And that's exactly what they wanted to do right here to Gideon. They wanted to kill him for what he did. Well, as all of this is going on, then they want to kill Gideon. The battle is about to start. The Midianites now are starting to muster their forces. It's harvest time, remember, because he's harvesting the crop. They're coming in to get their free food. So the story plays out in verse 33 that soon afterwards, the armies of Midian and Amalek and all the people of the east, they formed an alliance against Israel, and they crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. In other words, they're just getting ready to go to battle. They're ready to come conquer the Israelites, beat them up, knock them around, and steal the food, and head back home. Now it's not just the Midianites, it's the Amalekites as well, who have their own reputation, along with all these other eastern peoples. It's a huge army that just spreads out across the land. But verse 34 is where the music in our story changes. Then, verse 34, the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power, and he blew the ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men from the clan of Abiezer, they all gathered around him. This is the slow-mo part. This is Gideon walking out there, out to the battlefield, right? You got this whole thing? Gideon, he's not built like our guitar player, right? This is Gideon. He's built like me, all right? So he's walking out and slow, and he pulls the ram's horn out and pulls it up there, you know, the whole thing and the music, and you see over the backdrop, the army just comes over the top of the hill, and they all start to gather around Gideon, and you're like, yeah, you're just rallying around this whole thing, that whole thing, I'm just telling you. But the most important part, don't miss this, God clothed him with the Spirit. God gave him power to do what he asked him to do. Today in the New Testament, because of the resurrection of Jesus, we're not clothed with the Spirit anymore. When you say yes to Jesus, we're filled with the Spirit. It's the same Spirit, the same power, who equips us when we're lonely, when we feel ill-equipped, when we feel abandoned, when we feel like we're inadequate, when we feel like we have no influence, when we feel like we have got no voice. It's the Spirit of God that is there to equip us for the tasks and the callings that he calls us to. God never calls us to something and then steps back and abandons us. He's right there with us in the midst of it. You, me, Gideon, it's all the same people. He does the same thing. Well, this is great. So Gideon blows the ram's horn. He musters an army. But before he goes into battle, he wants to make sure. Remember, we asked God for a sign already. We brought the whole offering, and it went up in a puff of smoke. And he goes, all right, I got my army. Now we're about ready to go into battle. But let's pray about this one more time. Right? God, I'm going to get some fleece. Like, this is skin from a sheep. And I'm going to put it out here in the ground. Okay, God? And how many of you have ever done this? When I wake up in the morning, okay, all of us in this room, we want to make sure that we've heard from God. We all make a bargain with God, right? We just want to know that we heard from God. Coincidentally, I just want to encourage you with this. While we were praying this morning, I just felt like somebody, something with their eye, that we had a problem with their eye. It was their right eye, whatever. I shook a hand to the brother here, and I said, where's your wife? She's home. She has a rock in her right eye. See, I'm just telling you, isn't that cool the way God speaks, and God's going to take care of that situation. So anyway, we just want to know that we heard from God. So he puts a fleece out there and he says, all right, God, here's what I want you to do. When I get up in the morning, let the fleece be wet and the ground dry, and then I'll just know that I heard from you. So he lays his head down on his sweet little pillow, sleeps, gets up in the morning. First thing he does, runs to the fleece, picks it up. It's heavy. He wrings it out. There's a bowl full of water in there, and the ground is dry. All right. I really, really want to be sure that this is you. So I'm going to put the fleece out one more time. This time, let the fleece be dry and the ground be wet. And God would probably be thinking like, oh, you guys are so funny. I had no hurry, right? I'd go to sleep again. So Gideon sleeps another night, right? Gets up in the morning. First thing he does, checks the fleece. It's warm, soft, and fuzzy dry, and the ground around it is all damp with dew. And if I was Gideon, I'd be like, oh, shoot. It was God. I guess I'm going to have to do this after all. So he musters this army. Well, he gets an army together. He blows the trumpet. It's an army now with 32,000 people. You're thinking, this is awesome, 32,000. If I was marching into battle, 32,000, I'm feeling pretty good. But when you read the story, when you read the narrative, he's outgunned 4-1. His opposing army's got 4 for every one soldier they've got 4. Are you sure you heard from God? If I was in that army, I'd be looking out at the opposing army going, Gideon. In fact, that's exactly what happens. Because as the story goes on in chapter 7, verse number 2, the Lord said to Gideon, Gideon, guess what? You have too many warriors with you. if I let all of them fight the Midianites, the Israelites, well, they're going to boast to me that they themselves did this by their own strength. So Gideon, here's my plan. I love this. Verse number 3. Therefore, go and tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid, here's Gideon out there. Hey. Whoever is timid or afraid, you can go back home again. And 22,000 of them walked off the battlefield. Just kidding, guys. Hey, come back. Like, really? 22,000 of you were scared and walked away from the battlefield, but there was 10,000 who remained, who were willing to fight. Just imagine you're now in the 10,000-man army looking at the opposing team, going, Gideon, I really hope you've heard from God. I'll do my best here, but this is not really looking too good for us. Well, God's still not done with Gideon or the army yet. So he says, Gideon, get all the men. If you're campers, you love this whole thing. He says, get this 10,000-man army, come down to the creek and get a drink of water out of there. So they all come down to the water's edge. Now, how many campers we got here? Raise your hand, camping. I bet you bring city water with you, don't you? You wimps. I'm telling you, you want to drink water, you go down to the creek. That Missouri River water, I'm just telling you, right? I got to tell you something. My brother and I, when I was in the 3rd grade, he's in 5th grade, we rode bikes. It's on Front Street now out there. We're Handy Andy's. We rode bike all the way out to the bridge, all the way out. It was so hot. And we were like, cool. We brought canteens with us with city water. Well, we sucked them babies dry. It was a hot summer day. We're riding back on the gravel road, coming back. My brother's back. He's just covered with sweat bees all over his back, screaming at me, get the bees off me, get the bees off. I'm thinking, well, they're biting me too. Hello, you know. And we're just pedaling as fast as we could down this dirt road. Where am I going with this story? I don't know. And we ran out of water, and I remember being so thirsty. My brother and I filled our canteens with Missouri River water. We're upstream from the lagoon. It was fine, all right? Just saying. Okay. So all 10,000 of them come around the water, and 9,700 of them get down on their hands and knees and stick their mouths right in the water and start to drink. Can you say backwash? Right? But 300 of them, they get down and they cup their hands in the water and they bring it up to their mouth and drink the water that way. And God says, Gideon, those are the 300 guys we're going to fight with. I just knew. Maybe I should have put the fleece out a 3rd night, you know? Right? So we wonder sometimes, in verse 7, the Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men, I'm going to rescue you and I'm going to give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home. And the 9,700 went, okay, all right. But here's what you need to understand. When God calls you to do something, he says, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. I am always with you. The greater question is this, are we always with God? Well, the story goes on in verse 9. That night the Lord said, Gideon, get up. I want you to go down to the Midianite camp, for I have given you victory over them. Now look at the tense of that. Not, I'm going to give you victory over them. I have given you victory over them. It's yours. Just go claim it. It's kind of like getting a prize in the mail. Just redeem it. Just go get it. It's not past tense. It's not future tense. It's present tense. I have given them. You will have victory. It's already won. Think about this. When Jesus rose again from the grave, he already won the battle for us. It's won. Just go claim the prize. Say yes to it. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. Gideon, just go up and do it. God challenges us, though, sometimes to confront our fears head on. Because look how the story goes in verse 10. If you're afraid to attack, I want you just to go down to that camp with your servant Purah. So can you imagine this? This would be a good movie. Night falls, pitch black. So here's Gideon and Purah crawling over rocks and under the brush and through the scrub and through the grass and all that kind of thing. And God says, when you get down to their camp, verse number 11, listen to what the Midianites are saying, and you'll be greatly encouraged, and then you will be eager to attack. Isn't this cool? You just listen. I want you to eavesdrop to what they're talking about. And when you hear the subject of their conversation, you're going to be encouraged. It's going to be like, this is a no-brainer. In other words, my word is going to be fulfilled and true. I'm not just telling you a story. So that's exactly what they did. Verse 13, Gideon crept up just as a man, one of the Midianites. I love this. He was telling his companion about a dream. This is one of those dreams you have when you eat pizza, all right? Here's the dream. He says, look, I had this dream. In my dream, a loaf of barley bread, it just come tumbling down into the Midianite camp, and then it hit a tent and turned it over and just knocked it down. Whoa. I mean, would you listen to a dream like that and just go like, okay, a loaf of bread came rolling down the hill, hit a guy's house, knocked it over. Cool dream. But you understand the culture of the time put so much stock in dreams. They knew the value of dreams. And you know what I love about this story? Who do you suppose put the dream in that Midianite's mind when he slept on the pillow? It was God. He was already preparing the way for Gideon. He says, look, you've already won the battle. Just go claim your prize. That's what I love about this. We worry about so much stuff that hasn't happened yet, but God is already there engineering the victory for us. Just step into it, church. Step into those situations. God knows what you're afraid of and what you fear, but he's already preparing the way. So he had this dream about this loaf of bread rolling down the hill. Come on, we all have crazy dreams, don't we? I've told you about my dreams before. I had a dream one night that I was a muffler. You know this one, don't you? I woke up exhausted. Anyway, you know what I love about that? You laugh every time. I love it. Well, his friend hears the dream, and he interprets the dream. Verse 14. His companion answered, your dream can mean only one thing. God has given Gideon, the son of Joash, the Israelites victory over the Midianites and all their allies. You know what I love about this? God predicted the victory. The enemy proclaimed the victory. God predicted it. The enemy proclaimed it. I'm telling you, there's an enemy of your life, an enemy of your souls today. He already knows that the victory's been won. He already knows the outcome of the battle. We just don't ever accept it and step into the victory that is already ours. We've already won over the enemy. And when God looks at you, he sees the same thing he saw when he looked at Gideon. You might feel afraid. You might feel like you have no influence. You might feel inferior. You might feel diminished in your life. You might feel like a loser. You might feel like you failed. You might feel like you failed God, you failed family, you failed society, and you failed culture. But when God steps into your life, he looks at you in spite of that stuff and says, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Mighty hero. Come on, hero, the Lord is with you. God set Gideon up for success. God presents our lives with challenges. He presents difficulties to our lives, not so that we can pray to wriggle ourselves out of the difficulty, but so that in the midst of the difficulty, God can wriggle out of us the stuff that doesn't belong there, that blocks our view of him, so we can get a better vision of him. And when we have a better vision of him, we have a better perspective about ourselves. You're a hero. That's what God sees in you. Understand this. To do that, though, you have to take risks. Oh, we love to play it safe in our culture, don't we? I mean, we don't want to take risks. We buy insurance for our house. We buy insurance for all of our toys. We buy insurance for our life. We wrap up our children in bubble wrap before we send them outside and spray them all over with sunblock. We don't want to take risks. But when you follow God, you got to take risks. And if you risk nothing, you risk everything. In order to be a Christ follower, you have to risk everything. To risk nothing is to risk everything. God wants you to see the potential that he sees in you, because how you see God determines how you see yourself. How you see God determines how you treat your spouse. How you see God determines how you treat finances. How you see God determines how you interact with relationships. How you see God influences every decision and every choice that you make. It influences the size of the fear in your life or the size of the victory in your life. It's how you see God that determines all of those things. Fewer things in life help us get to know God better or faster than saying yes to the risks and the challenges that he holds out to us. And let me tell you something about spiritual maturity, church. Spiritual maturity comes when you start to forget about what people think about you and you start thinking about what God thinks about you. And when God thinks about you and when God sees you, he sees heroes. And it's not because of the things you are going to do. It's not because of the things you have done. It's because of who you are. You're one of his creation. You're not an accident. You're not the result of a moment of passion between a man and a woman. You are here on this earth because God purposed you to be here. He's got a plan for you, a desire for you, a purpose for you, a love for you, a revelation of himself to you. But it comes when we say yes to him and let God do his thing in all of us. So let me ask you again, how do you see yourself? How do you think God sees you? And I think that the stories we read in Scripture are there for a reason. If an ordinary guy like Gideon, there was something about Gideon that God saw that his daddy didn't see, for sure his brothers and sisters didn't see, the community didn't see, but God saw a hero in Gideon. But it had to be revealed through the things he would bring him through. And I don't see why you are any different than Gideon.